The interrogation chambers stank of ozone and burnt circuitry. Senna Voss hung suspended in the center of the room, her wrists locked in electromagnetic cuffs that hummed with barely contained energy. Her silver skin, normally radiant with the bioluminescent markings of her people, had dulled to the color of tarnished metal. The luminous patterns that traced her arms and shoulders flickered weakly, like dying stars. 12 days. 12 days since the corporate security forces had ambushed her diplomatic shuttle. 12 days of questions barked by faceless interrogators, of pain delivered with clinical precision, of sleep deprivation and isolation designed to break her will. Access codes. Princess. The voice came from behind a one-way mirror, distorted by speakers. Your stubbornness serves no purpose. Provide the defensive grid sequences for Stellara, and this ends. Senna raised her head, violet eyes blazing despite her exhaustion. Her white hair, shot through with threads of silver that moved like liquid mercury, cascaded over her shoulders. You'll get nothing from me. My people will never surrender to your corporate tyranny. A burst of electricity surged through the cuffs. Senna's body convulsed, her jaw clenched against the scream that tried to tear from her throat. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She was the crown princess of Stellara, last of the independent colonies that refused to bow to the Meridian Corporation's expansion. Her father had raised her to be strong, to endure, to never break. But everyone had a breaking point. The electricity ceased. Senna gasped for air, her lungs burning. Through blurred vision, she watched the interrogator enter the room. He wore the standard gray uniform of Meridian security, his face as bland and forgettable as every other corporate drone. We have time, Your Highness, he said, circling her like a predator. Your world has time. But how much longer can you endure? Another day? Another week? Senna spat at his feet. Until my last breath. The interrogator sighed and reached for the control panel. Senna closed her eyes, bracing for another wave of agony. The explosion that rocked the facility instead sent her swinging wildly in her restraints. Alarms shrieked to life, red emergency lights flooding the chamber. Through the chaos, she heard weapons fire, shouts, the metallic screech of doors being forced open. The interrogator spun toward the entrance, fumbling for his sidearm. He never cleared the holster. The door burst inward in a shower of sparks, and a figure rolled through the opening, a pistol already tracking targets with deadly precision. The stranger fired 3 times. The interrogator crumpled. 2 guards rushing through the door behind him dropped before they could raise their rifles. Senna stared through the haze of pain and confusion at her unexpected savior. He was human, tall and lean, with a kind of wiry strength that came from years of hard living. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and several days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. His clothes were a mismatched collection of worn leather and tactical gear, and a long coat hung from his shoulders, singed at the edges from plasma fire. His eyes met hers, a striking shade of green that seemed to cut through the smoky air. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Well, he said, his voice rough with a frontier accent, you're either the luckiest person in this facility, or I just made the worst decision of my life. Who are you? Senna's voice came out as a rasp. Name's Jace Thorne. He moved to her restraints, producing a small device from his coat. Professional troublemaker, amateur hero, and currently your only way out of this hellhole. The device interfaced with her cuffs, bypassing their security protocols. Senna dropped as the restraints released, her legs buckling. Jace caught her before she hit the ground, one arm supporting her weight. Easy there, princess. When's the last time you ate? Slept? I've lost count. Senna steadied herself against him, hating how weak she felt, how much she needed his support. Why are you helping me? Jace glanced toward the door, where more shouts echoed down the corridor. Long story, terrible reasons. and we're about 30 seconds from having this conversation while running for our lives. Can you move? Senna tested her legs. They trembled but held. The luminescent markings on her skin began to glow brighter, responding to her surge of adrenaline. I'm the daughter of High Sovereign Corrin. I was trained in combat arts before I could walk. I can move. A grin flashed across Jace's face, transforming it from dangerous to almost charming. I'm starting to like you already. Here. He handed her a spare pistol from his belt. You know how to use one of these? Senna checked the weapon's charge and safety mechanisms in one smooth motion. Point the dangerous end at the people trying to kill us? Smart and sarcastic. My favorite combination. Jace moved to the doorway, peering into the corridor beyond. My ship's in the facility's lower hangar. We've got maybe 5 minutes before every security grunt in this place converges on our position. Then we'd better not waste time talking. They moved into the corridor, Jace taking point while Senna covered their rear. The facility was a converted mining station, all narrow passages and industrial architecture. Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of red and shadow. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a 4-person security team. Both sides opened fire simultaneously. Jace dove left, Senna right, finding cover behind structural support columns. Energy bolts scorched the air between them, the smell of superheated metal filling the passage. 2 on your side, 2 on mine, Jace called out, firing blind around his column. On 3, we cross and take them from their blind spots. On 3 or after 3? Senna shouted back. During 3. That's not how counting works. Just move when I move. Senna found herself laughing, despite the absurdity of their situation, despite 12 days of torture, despite the very real possibility of death in the next few seconds. This human, this Jace Thorne, was either brilliant or completely insane. Possibly both. 3. Jace burst from cover, and Senna moved in perfect synchronization. They crossed the corridor in a diagonal pattern, weapons tracking. Her first shot caught a guard in the chest, dropping him instantly. Her second clipped another's shoulder, spinning him around. Jace's pistol barked twice more, and suddenly the corridor was silent, except for the wailing alarms. Not bad for someone who's been tortured for almost 2 weeks, Jace said. Already moving again. Not bad for a human who doesn't know how to count to 3, Senna replied. Staying close behind him, they descended 3 levels via emergency stairwells, encountering scattered resistance. Each time, they moved in an increasingly coordinated dance of covering fire and tactical positioning. Senna found her strength returning with each fight, her bioluminescent markings now glowing steadily across her skin. The lower hangar was chaos. Dozens of ships sat in various states of loading and maintenance, while security forces scrambled to lock down all exits. Through the confusion, Jace pointed to a mid-sized freighter that had seen better days. Its hull was patched in multiple places, and one engine housing looked like it had been rebuilt from spare parts. That's your ship? Senna asked dubiously. The Wandering Star, and she's beautiful, Jace said defensively. She's also fast, armed, and exactly where we need her to be. Come on. They sprinted across the hangar floor, using cargo containers and parked vessels for cover. Security forces spotted them and gave chase, energy bolts streaking past uncomfortably close. Jace returned fire without breaking stride. His aim surprisingly accurate for someone running at full speed. They reached the Wandering Star's boarding ramp just as a heavier security team rounded a stack of crates. Jace practically threw Senna up the ramp, then turned and fired a concentrated burst at a fuel coupling near the security team. The resulting explosion didn't kill anyone, but sent them diving for cover. Inside now, Jace shouted, following Senna up the ramp. He slapped the control panel, and the ramp began rising. Strap in anywhere, this launch is going to be rough. Senna stumbled into the cockpit, collapsing into the co-pilot's seat. Jace slid into the pilot's chair with practiced ease, his hands flying across the controls. The wandering star's engines rumbled to life with a sound that was distinctly unhealthy. Should engines sound like that? Senna asked, fumbling with the safety harness. Absolutely not, Jace said cheerfully, pulling back on the control yoke. The ship lurched upward, scraping against the hangar's ceiling. But she always pulls through. Usually. 90% of the time. Maybe 85. The wandering star shot through the hangar's atmospheric barrier, exterior guns tracking their escape. Jace threw the ship into a spinning barrel roll that should have been impossible for a vessel of this size and design. Weapons fire streaked past, some impacts rattling the shields. Hang on. Jace gunned the engines, and the mining facility fell away behind them. 3 security patrol craft launched in pursuit, their sleeker designs quickly closing the distance. Senna watched the tactical display, her training as a diplomat and strategist kicking in despite her exhaustion. They're trying to box us in. They'll force us into the asteroid field ahead, where we'll either crash or have to surrender. Or option 3, Jace said, his grin returning as he angled directly toward the asteroid field. We go exactly where they don't expect and show them why the wandering star earned her name. As they plunged into the chaotic maze of spinning rock and ice, Senna realized 2 things. First, she had traded one impossible situation for another. And second, against all logic and reason, she was starting to trust this reckless, infuriating, impossible human who had risked everything to save her. She just hoped they both lived long enough for her to figure out why the asteroid field was a graveyard of ancient planets. Thousands of tons of rock spinning through the void in unpredictable patterns. Jace threaded the wandering star through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow, the ship's hull groaning in protest with each sharp maneuver. Senna gripped her seat's armrests, her knuckles pale even against her silver skin. You're going to get us killed. Not today, Jace muttered, eyes locked on the view screen. His hands moved across the controls with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Those patrol ships are built for speed in open space, not agility in tight quarters. We've got the advantage here. An asteroid the size of a small moon loomed ahead. Jace dove beneath it, so close that Senna could see the pockmarked surface through the side viewport. One of their pursuers tried to follow and clipped the rock with its wing, sending it spinning out of control. 2 left, Senna noted, checking the tactical display. Her training aboard Stellara's diplomatic vessels hadn't prepared her for this kind of piloting. It was reckless, improvisational, and somehow working. They're smarter than their friend, Jace said, banking hard around a cluster of smaller rocks. Splitting up to flank us. Energy bolts streaked past the wandering star, one grazing the rear shields. The ship shuddered, and warning lights flickered across the console. Shields at 60%, Senna reported, her fingers naturally finding the co-pilot's controls. We can't take many more hits like that. Then we don't let them hit us. Jace killed the main engine suddenly, letting momentum carry them forward while he fired maneuvering thrusters in a complex sequence. The wandering star spun on its axis, bringing them face to face with the pursuit craft on their left. Return fire, Jace said calmly. Weapons console is in front of you. Senna didn't hesitate. Her hands found the targeting controls, and she unleashed the ship's forward cannons. The bolts struck the patrol craft's cockpit, and it veered wildly before exploding against an asteroid. Nice shot, Jace said, admiration clear in his voice. He rotated the ship again and punched the engines, accelerating deeper into the field. The final pursuer stayed on their tail, its pilot clearly more skilled than the others. It matched Jace's maneuvers, never quite close enough for a clean shot, but never far enough behind to lose them. Stubborn one, Jace observed. weaving through a narrow canyon between two massive asteroids. Probably hoping we'll make a mistake. Will we? Jace flashed that dangerous grin again. Not the kind he's expecting. He guided the ship through increasingly treacherous terrain, each turn tighter than the last. Senna's stomach lurched with every sudden direction change. But she forced herself to focus on the tactical display, looking for an advantage. There, she said, pointing to a dense cluster of smaller asteroids ahead. If we pass through that cluster and they follow, the debris field will scatter their sensors. We could double back and catch them off guard. Jace glanced at her, something like respect flickering in his green eyes. You've done this before. Diplomatic escorts encounter pirates occasionally. I paid attention during the evasive action. Diplomatic escorts don't usually shoot this well. My father believed princesses should know both how to negotiate peace and how to defend. Senna's voice hardened. Meridian Corporation never gave us the first option. Jace nodded grimly and aimed for the cluster. They plunged into the swirling debris, proximity alarms shrieking as rocks pinged off their shields. The pursuit craft followed, maintaining visual contact through the chaos. Now, Jace said, cutting engines again and firing retro thrusters. The wandering star came to an almost complete stop. Hidden in the debris cloud that the patrol craft shot past them, its pilot realizing the trap too late. Senna fired before Jace could give the order, her shots precise and devastating. The enemy ship's engines exploded, and it tumbled end over end before slamming into a large asteroid. Silence fell over the cockpit, broken only by the ping of small debris against the hull and the steady hum of the engines. They'll send more, Senna said quietly, staring at the wreckage. Eventually. But we've got time to put distance between us and that facility. Jace plotted a course out of the asteroid field, his movements slower now, more careful. How are you holding up? The question surprised Senna. In the chaos of escape and combat, she'd pushed her body beyond its limits on pure adrenaline. Now, in the relative calm, she felt every bruise, every strained muscle, every place where the interrogators had applied their methodical pain. I've been better, she admitted, unwilling to show weakness, but too tired to lie convincingly. Jace's expression softened. There's a medical bay behind the cockpit. Not fancy, but it's got supplies. You should treat those wounds while I get us clear. I can wait. You can barely sit upright, Jace said, not unkindly. Go. I'll set the autopilot once we're in clear space. Then we need to talk about what happens next. Senna wanted to argue, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She unbuckled her harness and stood on unsteady legs. Jace rose to help her, his hand gentle on her elbow. I can manage, she said, pulling away more sharply than intended. I know you can. Jace held up his hands in a gesture of peace. Doesn't mean you have to. Senna held his gaze for a long moment, searching for deception or ulterior motives. She found only genuine concern, which somehow made her more uncomfortable than if he'd been leering at her. Why did you rescue me? She asked abruptly. The truth, not some heroic deflection. Jace leaned against the console, suddenly looking as tired as she felt. I was there for a smuggling job. Medical supplies for the miners who couldn't afford Meridian's prices. While I was loading cargo, I overheard security bragging about the princess they had locked up. How the corporation was going to make an example of you. And that made you decide to stage a rescue operation? Not immediately, Jace admitted. I finished my job, got paid, was halfway to my ship when I stopped and thought about walking away. About letting Meridian break you, use you to subjugate your people. He met her eyes. I've walked away from a lot of things in my life, Princess. Some I regret, some I don't. But walking away from you would have been one I couldn't live with. Senna felt something shift in her chest. an unfamiliar warmth that had nothing to do with her bioluminescent markings. "You don't even know me." "No," Jace agreed. "But I know Meridian. I know what they do to worlds that resist. And I know that people like you, people willing to endure torture rather than surrender their people, are rare enough to be worth saving." Before Senna could respond, the ship's proximity alarm chimed. Jace spun back to the controls, his relaxed posture vanishing in an instant. "We've got company," he said, studying the sensors. 3 ships, cruiser class, dropping out of faster-than-light travel directly ahead. Senna moved to his side, ignoring the pain. "Meridian? Worse, bounty hunters." Jace's jaw tightened. They must have picked up the distress call from those patrol ships. Word travels fast when there's a reward involved. "How much am I worth?" "You really want to know? Tell me." Jace pulled up the bounty listing on his console. Senna's official diplomatic portrait stared back at her, alongside a reward amount that made her breath catch. 5 million credits, she whispered. "Dead or alive?" "Alive is worth double," Jace added. "Meridian wants you breathing so they can parade you in front of cameras. Make an example of what happens to resistance." The bounty hunter ships were closing fast, spreading into an attack formation designed to cut off escape routes. "Can we outrun them?" Senna asked. "Not in our current condition. Shields are damaged, and the Wandering Star isn't built for prolonged combat against 3 cruisers." Jace's hands flew across the controls, calculating options. "But we don't need to outrun them. We just need to survive long enough to jump to faster than light. How long to charge the FTL drive?" 4 minutes. "And how long until they're in weapons range?" Jace checked the display. 2 minutes. Senna moved to the weapons console without being asked. "Then we buy ourselves 2 minutes. You're wounded, exhausted, and probably concussed," Jace pointed out. "And you're reckless, arrogant, and flying a ship held together with optimism and spare parts," Senna shot back. "It seems we're both making poor decisions today." Despite the situation, Jace laughed. "Fair point. All right, Princess. Let's see what you've got." The bounty hunter ships opened fire first, long-range shots designed to test their shields and gauge their response. Jace wove evasively while Senna returned fire, forcing the hunters to respect their defensive capabilities. "They're trying to hurt us," Senna observed, watching the tactical display. "Push us into a kill box where all 3 can focus fire." "Let them think it's working," Jace said, appearing to comply with their herding. "When they commit, we'll punch through the weakest point in their formation." "The ship on our left has slower response times," Senna noted. "Their pilot's good, but not as good as the others." "You noticed that too?" Jace sounded impressed. 3 minutes to FTL. Hold on." He suddenly accelerated directly toward the leftmost bounty hunter, closing the distance at a rate that sent every tactical instinct in Senna's head screaming. The hunter, surprised by the aggressive maneuver, opened fire with everything it had. "Shields won't hold," Senna shouted as energy bolts hammered their defenses. "They don't have to hold for long." Jace jerked the controls at the last second, sliding the Wandering Star underneath the hunter's hull. Their shields scraped against each other with a shriek of protesting energy fields. "Now." Jace called. Senna fired point-blank into the hunter's belly, her shots tearing through their weaker underside armor. Explosions rippled across the enemy ship's hull as critical systems failed. They shot out the other side of the exchange, shields flickering dangerously. The wounded hunter fell away, trailing debris and atmosphere. 2 left, 2 minutes to FTL, Jace said, pushing the engines hard. The remaining hunters pursued, their formation tighter now, more cautious. "They won't fall for the same trick twice," Senna said. "Good thing I've got more tricks." But before Jace could demonstrate, the ship's systems flickered. Lights dimmed, and the engine pitch changed ominously. What was that? Senna demanded. Jace's face had gone pale. Power couplings damaged. Must have taken a hit we didn't notice during the asteroid chase. Can you fix it? Not while piloting and being shot at. The hunters sensed weakness and closed in for the kill. Energy bolts streaked past the wandering star, several connecting with their failing shields. Warning klaxons blared through the cockpit. Shields at 20%, Senna reported, fighting to keep fear from her voice. 60 seconds to FTL. Won't matter if we lose power first. Jace made a decision, killing the main engines and diverting all available power to shields and the FTL drive. We're dead in the water, but the drive will charge faster. The hunters surrounded them, weapons primed for the killing blow. Through the view screen, Senna could see the lead ship's captain, a scarred figure grinning at their helplessness. Unidentified freighter. A voice crackled over the com. Power down all systems and prepare to be boarded. Resist, and we'll collect the dead or alive portion of the bounty. Jace's hand hovered over the com button, but he looked at Senna first. Your call, princess. We can fight and probably die, or we can surrender, and you can try to escape later. Senna stared at the bounty hunter ships, then at Jace. This human who had risked everything for a stranger, who had fought beside her without hesitation, who was offering her the choice even now, when either option could mean his death. The bioluminescent markings across her skin flared bright, responding to her surge of defiance and something else. Something she wasn't ready to name. How long to FTL? She asked. 30 seconds. Then we hold. Senna's hands returned to the weapons console. And if we die free. Jace's grin returned, wild and reckless. I knew I liked you. The hunters opened fire. The wandering star shields held for 10 seconds, 15, 20. Warning lights painted the cockpit red as systems failed one after another. 10 seconds, Jace counted down, his hand on the FTL activation. 9, 8, ... The shields collapsed. Energy bolts struck bare hull, tearing through armor plating. 5, 4. An explosion rocked the ship. Senna was thrown against her restraints, the breath knocked from her lungs. 2, 1 ... Jace slammed his hand down on the control. Reality twisted, stars stretched into lines, and the wandering star leaped into faster-than-light travel. The bounty hunters vanished, left behind in normal space with their reward slipping through their fingers' dot in the sudden silence. Senna and Jace sat breathing hard, staring at each other across the smoke-filled cockpit. We're alive, Senna said, almost unable to believe it. Barely, Jace replied, already checking damage reports. But alive counts. Senna unbuckled her harness and stood on shaking legs. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the chase and fight finally gave out. She swayed, darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision. Senna, Jace said, catching her before she fell. Her name sounded different in his voice, personal rather than formal. I'm fine, she managed, but her body disagreed. The past 12 days, the escape, the combat, it all crashed down on her at once. You're not fine, Jace said gently, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing. And that's okay. You've earned the right to not be fine for a while. He carried her from the cockpit to a small cabin, laying her carefully on a narrow bunk. Through the haze of exhaustion, Senna felt him removing her torn boots, covering her with a blanket that smelled of engine oil and something uniquely him. Where are we going? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Somewhere safe, Jace replied, sitting on the edge of the bunk. A place where Meridian doesn't have easy reach, where we can rest and figure out our next move. Why? The question that had haunted her since the rescue forced its way past her lips. Why are you doing all this? Jace was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes studying her face. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost vulnerable. Maybe I'm tired of running from things that matter. Maybe I saw someone who needed help and remembered what it felt like to be helpless. Or maybe, he paused, something flickering across his expression. Maybe some people are worth the risk. Senna wanted to respond, to process what his words meant, but exhaustion pulled her down into darkness. The last thing she felt was Jace's hand briefly touching her silver hair. Gentle and reverent dot. As consciousness faded, Senna realized that in less than a day, this reckless human pilot had become the first person she truly trusted in years. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like hope.